Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a deep dive into what is easily one of the most fascinating and honestly unconventional playstyles in the Immortal Realm. Usually when we think of massively multiplayer online games, we picture swords clashing, fireballs flying, and just endless loot grinding. But what if the ultimate power in the game wasn't a sword, but a pen? Today, we're breaking down the Ledger build, which is a template that literally lets you rule the realm through absolute, unquestionable order. So let's just tackle this question right out of the gate. Can paperwork actually be a weapon? I know it sounds like a total joke, right? Just picture your typical MMO experience. You're out there slaying dragons, clearing dungeons, hoarding all the gold you can carry. But the Ledger build completely flips that script. Instead of raiding, you're auditing contracts. Instead of casting these massive, destructive meteor swarms, you're issuing bail and processing parole. It's just a brilliant contrast. It offers a totally different kind of authority. It's the kind of power where the mightiest warriors in the realm actually have to come to you to get their affairs in order. Okay, so what exactly is this? Basically, the Ledger build is defined as a mage-leaning, civic support template. Your primary focus here is on high mobility, managing public records, and issuing crown writs. You are absolutely not a pure combat class. In fact, if you're playing this build correctly, you're going to spend vastly more time traveling between guild halls, filing documents, and witnessing major player events than you ever will fighting monsters. You're basically the glue holding the civic society together in the Immortal Realm. All right, moving into Section 1, Skills and Stats, the Blueprint. To give you a clear idea of how this looks, let's look at a direct comparison. Over on the left, you've got your pure combat mage. They rely heavily on skills like anatomy and healing just to stay alive in the thick of a fight. But over on the right, the Ledger build completely ditches those traditional combat skills. You just swap them right out for 100 points in Inscription. You're basically trading battlefield triage for ultimate utility, crafting scrolls, and mastering the exact paperwork that fuels your civic duties. Let's break this down even further and look at how your 700 total skill points are distributed. You're going to cap out Magery, Inscription, Evaluating Intelligence, and Meditation at 100 points each. That right there is your core engine. Then you've got about 300 points left over, and that all goes into defense and utility. We're talking things like resisting spells, wrestling, which is super important so your casts don't get disrupted, and spirit speak. The whole distribution leans super heavily toward mage utility and self-preservation. Because remember, your goal isn't to stand your ground and nuke an enemy. Your goal is to survive, support your allies, and live long enough to file the paperwork. Now, when it comes to your core stats, the distribution is very intentional. You want 100 intelligence. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You need a massive mana pool for Magery and to cover those really high costs of Inscription. You'll keep dexterity at a modest 45 just to give you decent casting speed. But here's the wild part. You need 80 strength. Why on earth does a paperwork-pushing mage need to be so buff? Well, because reagents are heavy. As a Ledger member, you are carrying around this massive loadout of reagents, blank scrolls, and spellbooks all across the realm. You literally need the muscle just to carry your briefcase. Which brings us to Section 2, Ledger Ladder, Climbing the Ranks. I want you to burn this number into your brain, 200. This isn't just some random figure, this is your daily service point cap. You see, the progression grind in the Ledger order is a marathon. It is definitely not a sprint. You're strictly capped at earning 200 service points, which is about 20 filings, every single day. You can't just go out and grind monsters for 24 hours straight to reach the top. You have to consistently show up and do your civic duty day in and day out. So, how exactly do you earn those points? Well, you earn them entirely through public-facing civic actions. Doing a simple Ledger lookup to research the public record? That nets you 1 point. Filing an attestation gets you 2 points. Issuing a death certificate at a player's gravestone earns you 2 filing points plus an attestation bonus. And witnessing a contract between players nets you 3 points. Notice what isn't on this list anywhere? Yep, killing things. Your entire progression is tied directly to interacting with the community and documenting their actions. Now, as you accumulate those points and pass your exams, you start unlocking some incredibly powerful civic authorities. Hitting the rank of Recorder allows you to actually post crown writs and craft bail contracts. Reaching Witness lets you handle parole deeds. But Arbiter? Arbiter is where things get really exciting. It's the very first rank that actively issues authority, which allows you to officialize a player writ to crown branding. You literally go from simply recording the rules to actively enforcing the realm's justice system. It's a huge step up. But this is where that patience we talked about really comes into play. Check out this timeline. Once you hit those upper echelons, you don't just need more points, you start facing mandatory minimum hold times. You actually have to hold the rank of Arbiter for 7 days, Chancellor for 14 days, and Proctor for a whopping 30 days before you can even be considered for the Capstone High Registral rank. So doing the math, that is a massive 51-day time gate, just sitting at the very top of the ladder. It's built that way to ensure that only the absolute, most dedicated, patient players get to wield the highest civic power. Moving right along to Section 3, Economy and Gear, Funding the Build. Okay, so you might be wondering, how does a bureaucrat actually make any gold? It basically evolves in 3 distinct stages. In Step 1, the early game, your inscription skill is your main hustle. You're crafting and selling high-margin specialty scrolls like Recall and Mark to other players. In Step 2, the mid-game, as you gain a few ranks, your income shifts to collecting filing fees as a recorder and earning service tokens from daily ledger tasks. And finally, in Step 3, the late game, this is where your civic prestige really pays the bills. You're earning premium fees for witnessing high-stakes contracts and handling super-exclusive Crown Right work. Your authority literally becomes your currency. And as you'd expect, your wardrobe and your inventory are going to evolve right alongside your wallet. You start out incredibly humble. We're talking just basic cloth robes, maybe some leather underneath, a spellbook, and a heavy bag full of regents and blank scrolls. By the mid-game, you're upgrading to magic attribute armor that focuses on lower mana cost and mana regeneration, plus an augmented spellbook. But late-game gear? That is where you truly look the part. You'll be donning the highly prestigious, totally stunning, time-woven augmented mage suit, topped off with rank-gated Ledger Hall regalia. You will absolutely look every bit the high-ranking official you've become. All right, let's ground this a bit in Section 4, Life and Survival Daily Reality. To really understand how to survive with this build, you have to understand what a typical gaming session actually looks like for a Ledger member. Your daily tasks are incredibly social. You're going to be continuously meeting up with players to file their contracts, witnessing major civic events, issuing attestations on cause, and processing parole or surrenders for prisoners. You even have the rather solemn duty of issuing death certificates at gravestones. You are just constantly interacting with other players' milestones. So your survival completely depends on these social connections, simply because you're providing a service that everyone else needs. But we definitely have to be honest about the limitations here. You have notoriously low solo damage, so your primary mitigation for that is just to stay in groups and rely on your Magery purely for self-defense. You're also going to suffer from a really high reagent burn, which you can mitigate by using all those precast scrolls you made with your inscription skill. You're also highly vulnerable in player versus player combat. That means you absolutely must avoid dangerous open PvP zones like Veluca if you're alone, for sure. Always bring an escort. And finally, your lifestyle is incredibly travel-heavy. That is exactly why keeping Magery at 100 is non-negotiable. Your ability to recall and gate across the map is without a doubt your greatest survival tool. High mobility and grouping up, absolutely mandatory. Now, what if you put in the hours and eventually decide that the pure Ledger life just isn't quite your vibe? Well, the great thing about this build is its flexibility. If you want to change, you have some really excellent respect options. You can easily trade Spirit Speak as a gate to add Necromancy, giving you powerful combat buffs like Wraith Form to save on those reagents. Or you could just drop Inscription entirely and pivot right back to pure combat skills like Tactics and Anatomy. Alternatively, if you love the Civic layer but just want a slightly different flavor, you can specialize toward the Chiridian Civic build. The point is, you're never truly locked in. So, I guess that brings us to the ultimate question. Do you have the patience to rule the realm through order, or are you going to need to respec back to the sword? This Ledger build challenges pretty much everything we know about how to wield power in an MMO. It takes dedication, extreme social savvy, and just this ironclad commitment to the rules. It's definitely not for everyone, but for those who do master it, they don't just play in the Immortal Realm, they govern it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the Immortal Realm source texts. Get out there, get your spellbooks ready, and I'll catch you next time.